Yo, what's up? The PTR update is live. Let's take a look at Metadrew. I've already tested him out a little bit, and to be honest with you, his base kit is looking pretty rough. His S1 steals 40 attack and defense from the enemy and transfers it to the ally with the most burden of duat stacks, and if the target is a boss, their attributes will not be reduced. Now this is a flat amount of stats, 100 attack and defense every single time he does his S1, and it's permanent. So if you do this S1 10 times, you will steal 1000 attack and defense. Sounds broken, but the gimmick is really hard to pull off. His passive is when he dies, a revival countdown begins after allies have taken 8 active turns. He will revive, and every time an ally Esper revives, all allied Esper's damage increases by 10%, maximum 5 times. So it's same as the he, 50% damage increase. His S3, every time an allied Esper takes 30,000 damage, they gain 1 stack of burden of duat, maximum 5 stacks. When any ally takes fatal damage, they receive the maximum number of burden of duat. And Metadrew gains a bonus turn. Attacks all enemies, damage is equals to 8% of max HP. The damage dealt also scales with the number of duat stacks. The more stacks they have, the higher the damage. Burden of duat is crit damage plus 8%, accuracy and resist plus 10%, stacks up to 5 times and does not reset upon revival. So you can get a total of 40% crit damage and 50% accuracy and resist. It's not the greatest, to be honest with you. If you have his S3 maxed out, it's now 15,000 damage instead of 30,000, which is still pretty high. So you need to take 15,000 5 times in order to get 5 stacks. His captain ability is 40% universal. His divinate is counter attack chance plus 25%. His rival runes is using the frost set, speed, HP. His R1 gives him basic stats. His R2 raises the stack limit of burden of duat to 10. So now you can get 80% crit damage or 100% accuracy and resist. His R4 changes his passive from 8 active turns to 5 active turns to revive him. And lastly, his R6 increases the number of damage up stacks allied Espers can gain from allied revivals to 10. So you can get 100% damage increase, essentially doubling your damage. Alright, now let me show you a few tests. First test, I'm going to show you that his S1 is a permanent stat steal. So if you do this 10 times, you will get 1000 attack and defense to your ally with the most burden of duat stacks. His S1 only scales with max HP, so he cannot benefit from this attack and defense increase. Now let's take a look at his S1 damage on this guy. 602. Now we should do slightly more damage because this guy has 100 less defense. So we did 602 just now. Now it's 614. We increased our damage by a little bit. And the stat that we got from this guy is transferred to my genie because my genie has 5 stacks of the burden of duat. So boom, there we go. It goes to genie. Alright, the next thing I want to show you is when he dies, he does not give you the passive from his S3. So even if your allies take 30,000 damage, you will not gain the burden of duat until he revives. So he's gonna die turn 1 right here, and then your allies will take more than 30,000 damage, but they still won't get the burden of duat stacks because he needs to be on the battlefield. And you also don't know when he's going to revive unless you count the turns, because there's no turn count. Just put the number of turns required for him to revive on his dead body or something, because right now I don't know how many turns left before he revives, right? So right here I've already taken a lot of damage on both of my allies, but they still couldn't get the burden of duat stacks because Metadrew isn't on the battlefield, so he's not giving me the passive. But the moment he revived, he gave my genie 2 stacks of burden of duat. So as long as you can take 30,000 damage even when he's dead, the moment he revives and when your ally gets attacked the next time, when he is alive, you will instantly get like a bunch of stacks depending on how much damage you took in the first place. So my genie already has 5 stacks because she took damage while he was dead. Alright, now let me show you his interaction of S3 with allies that provide shield like Clara or Lian. Do you still get the buff of burden of duat when you take more than 15,000 damage, or is shield going to mitigate that S3 passive? I will just click auto and leave it up for like 5 minutes or something. Now let's take a look at the amount of stacks I have on all of my units. Metadrew has 0 stacks of burden of duat. Clara has 1 because at the start of battle she took 15,000 damage. Sakura has 0, Lian has 0, and Lu Shang has 0. So his S3 has negative synergy with Espers that provide shield on their skill. So Espers like Lian or Clara will not work very well with him because you actually mitigate the amount of damage you take. If you have a 10,000 HP shield and you take 15,000 damage, you only take 5,000 damage, which is why I don't have any burden of dual stacks on all of my allies except for my Clara during the start of the battle. So it's pretty terrible when you run him with Espers that provide shield. Alright, I'm gonna stop the testing at that for now. Now let's talk about his usability in PvE and in PvP. In PvE bossing contents, his S1 is really strong, but the fact that you can only give it to the ally with the most burden of dual stacks makes it so it's very RNG and not reliable at all, because even your supports can take more damage than your DPS. If the boss attacks your supports more often than your DPS, then this stat steal will go to your supports instead of your DPS. In order to make him work for PvE, his S1 needs to be transfers it to the ally with the highest attack or defense. In other words, your DPS, because this will be absolutely useless if it goes to your support and you can't control it. The boss can randomly attack your DPS or supports, right? So building him around this S1 is going to be really tough and not going to be worth your time at all. Unless you are in shadow bosses. Because in shadow bosses, you will have 2 slots in the front that you can sort of manipulate to take more damage, right? You put your DPS in the front, they will most likely take the most damage out of all your other supports in the back line. That way you can sort of control his S1 in order to make sure that it goes to your DPS instead of your supports. Now his passive, when he dies and revives, he will give you extra damage up to 50%, which is the same as Zihi, but you can stack it up faster than Zihi if you can make him die quickly. So if you want to build around his passive, you can just make him level 1 so that he can get one shot turn 1. It's going to be similar to Tolan, where you want Tolan to die as soon as possible, but the difference between him and Tolan is that you get immediate value from Tolan's death, whereas Metadrew, you need to take 8 active turns before your damage ramps up, and you need it to happen 5 times, which means you need a total of 40 turns to max out his passive right here. Now if you have him at R6, the damage amp can go up to 10 times, so it essentially doubles your damage, and you also only need to take 50 turns because now the action needed from his R4 is 5 active turns instead of 8. So this guy is pretty pay to win if you want to run him in PvE, because you need his R4 and also R6 in order to get the double damage. And lastly, his S3 needing to take 15,000 damage to get 1 stack of Burden of Reward is a little bit difficult. In most bossing contents, you don't really take 15,000 damage per hit, so most of the time the boss needs to take 2 turns in order to do 15,000 plus damage on you. In order to get 5 stacks, the fastest way is to die, but you don't really want your Espers to die, except for Metadrew. If you don't run a reviver for your DPS, then they're not going to revive and you're going to lose a lot of damage. So the only feasible way for you to get 5 stacks on your DPS Esper so that they can benefit from Drew's S1 is by running your DPS as squishy as possible, but making sure that they don't die, and also running your supports with defense, and speed, because you need to make sure that they take the least amount of damage as possible. So for PvE, there is a shit ton of RNG for him to work. His S1 has RNG, his passive has RNG, his S3 also has RNG. This guy is an RNG galore. For PvP, however, I think he's going to be crazy broken. He's still going to be pretty RNG with his S1, but the stat reduction is going to be pretty good for PvP because it's permanent. Every single time you S1 with him, you will reduce the enemy's defense and attack by 100. And his S3 will be a lot easier to rack up because in PvP you take a lot of damage, right? It's pretty easy to take 15,000 damage within one single hit. So that's all the testing I'm going to do for now for Drew. His PvE, I don't think is going to work that well. He seems pretty broken, but the gimmick is way too hard to pull off. And one important thing, if you want to run him in PvE, it might be best to leave him at level 1 and no resonance, unless you can get him to R6 or R4. In PvE, you actually want him to die as soon as possible to get this damage increase, which gives you more damage than his Burden of Reward at max stacks and also his S1 as well. So in PvE, you just want him to die. He will not work in Ritual Miracle because this is not immediate value. you need to take 8 active turns in order for this to proc. So it's mostly going to be used in PvE bossing contents. But again, it's going to be pretty hard for him to work. You're going to need a shit ton of RNG for him to even be decent in PvE bossing contents. For PvP, you do want him to be leveled up because he will actually do a decent amount of damage with his S3. And you want him to stay alive as long as possible in PvP because you want him to use his S1 as much as possible to reduce the enemy's attack and defense. So yeah, that's about it for Metadrew. I'm going to take a look at the rest of the update later. But for now, Metadrew mostly just looks like a PvP Esper to me. That's about it. Ciao.